Welcome to the Decode Deep Dive. We are so glad you are here with us today. If you are a curious learner looking for a shortcut to being well-informed without all the overwhelm, you are in the exact right place.
Absolutely. We have a really incredible topic to unpack today.
We really do. Today's mission is a full exploration of Mel Robbins' concept, the let them theory. We are going to unpack a deceptively simple, basically a two-step framework for reclaiming your time, protecting your energy, and honestly, dramatically improving your relationships.
And doing that by letting go of the one thing in this universe you can never actually control, which is other adults.
Right, which is so much harder than it sounds, because usually when we talk about navigating life, there is this underlying assumption that we are sitting behind a steering wheel. You turn the wheel to the left, the car goes left.
Right, it operates on this mechanical certainty.
Exactly. You put in the effort, you get the predictable result, and it feels safe. But then we take that same expectation and we just map it onto the people around us.
We desperately want our spouses and our kids and our coworkers to operate just like that steering wheel. We really think if we just use the right words or apply the right amount of pressure, we can just steer their behavior.
But then you step into the real world. You try to reason with the stubborn parent or, organize a group of adults, and you suddenly realize that steering wheel you are holding onto isn't actually connected to anything.
It is completely detached.
Yes, you are sitting there furiously turning a piece of plastic while the car is just careening down a hill, which is basically the core of what we are talking about today.
What's fascinating here is that this requires a really profound unlearning of our basic survival instincts. We are going to explore the brain science of stress, the dynamics of adult friendships, and the psychology of behavioral change.
And to really set the stage for all of that science, we have to talk about the origin story of this theory, because it perfectly captures that exact moment of realizing your steering wheel is broken. And it actually starts at a high school prom.
Oh, the ultimate chaotic environment.
Truly. So Mel Robbins' son, Oakley, is getting ready for prom, and it is that classic last-minute scramble. They finally get the tuxedo sorted out, they hunt down the specific sneakers he wanted, but then there was this big dispute over the corsage.
Right, the corsage.
Yeah, Mel had gone out of her way to buy this really beautiful corsage. But Oakley tells her, hey, do not bring it, because his date specifically said she didn't want one.
Which is a very clear boundary set by the teenagers actually going to the event.
Exactly. But that parental instinct to control the narrative totally kicks in. Mel brings the corsage anyway. She is convinced she knows better, and she wants to fix a potential social faux pas.
Right. She is managing the outcome.
So they get to the photo location, and the date is already wearing a beautiful custom corsage she made herself. And Mel just makes things incredibly awkward by pulling out the one she bought.
Oh, no.
Yeah. But it gets so much worse. The situation escalates from just socially awkward to a full-blown logistical disaster because it suddenly starts pouring rain.
And nobody has umbrellas, I assume.
Nope. None of these teenagers in their expensive black tie outfits have umbrellas. And to top it off, they totally failed to make dinner reservations anywhere.
Of course they did.
So they're standing in a downpour, and their grand plan is to walk to a tiny, tiny taco stand called Amigos, which is basically the size of a utility shed.
I mean, for a parent who is conditioned to manage everything, watching kids march into a rainstorm toward a taco shed in their prom gear, that triggers an immediate crisis response.
Oh, the parents are completely panicking. Mel pulls out her phone. She starts frantically trying to find a sit-down reservation for 20 soaking wet teenagers at a nice restaurant. She is trying to order pizzas. She is trying to reroute the entire evening.
She is just white-knuckling that detached steering wheel.
Perfectly said. And that is exactly when her older daughter, Kendall, just grabs her arm and says two simple words. She says, let them.
Just let them.
Yeah. Kendall points out the reality. If they want to go to a cramped taco bar, let them. If they get their formal wear soaked, let them. If the expensive new sneakers get ruined in the mud, let them. It is their prom. It is their experience.
What's fascinating here is that intervention acts as an immediate psychological circuit breaker. Because the mother's frantic attempt to get a restaurant wasn't actually about the teenagers having a good time.
Wait, really? What was it about then?
It was entirely about alleviating her own anxiety regarding how a prom is supposed to look. You see, we all possess this hardwired need for control, and it is actually rooted in fear and survival.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
Yeah, neurologically, managing our environment was how our ancestors survived. Unpredictability meant danger. So when people act in ways we wouldn't, or situations veer off the script, our brain interprets that lack of control as a literal survival threat.
Wow, so that totally reframes what it means to be a control freak. It's not always about being domineering. It is just a misfiring survival mechanism. Well, when Kendall said let them, it just evaporated Mel's anxiety instantly. She handed her son $40, watched them run into the rain, and she actually enjoyed watching them figure it out.
It is a massive release of pressure.
It is. But translating that prom story into a daily practice means we have to look at the actual architecture of this framework. And it is built on a very specific equation, which is let them plus let me.
The seesaw of power. And that dual structure is the only reason the framework functions. If you attempt to use one half without the other, the whole philosophy basically collapses.
Right, so let's break down the two halves. The let them part is the conscious act of releasing the illusion of control. It is accepting that you cannot dictate other people's actions, you can't control their thoughts, and you can't govern their emotions.
You are dropping the steering wheel entirely.
Exactly. But then you have the second half, the let me part. This is where you take absolute, radical responsibility for your own boundaries, your own responses, and your own actions.
And the necessity of that second step is huge, especially when you look at how our egos try to protect us from rejection. There is a massive trap waiting for anyone who only practices the let them part.
Yes, the trap of superiority. Let's look at a scenario that probably happens thousands of times a day. You are scrolling through your social media feed on a Saturday night, and you see a photo of your close friends on a girls' weekend.
And you are not invited.
You didn't even know was happening. So the immediate biological response is this sharp sting of social rejection. The instinct is to fire off a passive-aggressive text.
Or to obsessively analyze what you did wrong.
Right. And if you only apply the first half of the framework, you might sit there and say, well, fine, let them go on their little trip without me. Let them be cliquey.
Which feels like a victory for about 30 seconds. It gives you this rush of defensive adrenaline.
But okay, let's unpack this. If I just sit on my couch saying, let them go without me, doesn't that just make me a passive victim? Or worse, doesn't it just make me really bitter?
It absolutely does.
There's this analogy from the source material about a playground seesaw that I love. When you get hurt or rejected, you feel heavy. You sink down to the dirt on the bottom of the seesaw.
Right.
And when you say let them in that defensive way, it is like pushing your feet off the ground so hard that you launch yourself to the very top of the seesaw. You are suddenly looking down at them.
You get this jolt of emotional detachment and false superiority.
Exactly. You convince yourself you are above their petty drama.
But sitting high on that seesaw just provides a temporary anesthetic. The structural flaw of a seesaw is that if you stay suspended at the top, looking down at everyone, you are entirely isolated.
You are all alone up there.
Yes. And this concept shares a lot of DNA with Stoicism and detachment theory. But people massively misunderstand Stoicism. They think it means becoming a stone and cutting yourself off so you can't be hurt.
The pop culture version is just burying your feelings.
Which is terribly unhealthy. True philosophical detachment is about clarity. It is about radical acceptance of reality, so you can make a rational decision about your next move. If you weaponize the theory to withdraw, you aren't empowering yourself at all.
And that is exactly where the let me step comes in. It forces you to climb down from the top of the seesaw. You have to stand on solid ground and take action.
You move from passive reaction to active creation.
So instead of brooding, you ask, let me evaluate if these are my real friends. Or, let me plan my own fun this weekend. Let me text someone else and organize a hike. You put the energy back on yourself.
But applying this while scrolling safely in your living room is one thing. The real test happens out in the physical world when someone is actively driving you crazy in real time.
Oh, absolutely. The tiny paper cuts of modern life. Like, why do these things make us want to explode? Think about being trapped in a middle seat on an airplane and the guy right behind you is just aggressively coughing without covering his mouth.
A literal nightmare.
Or you are hiking and you watch a lady let her dog poop right on the trail and she just walks away. These are minor offenses, objectively speaking, but our reaction is completely disproportionate. Your heart rate spikes, you start sweating.
You feel that intense rage bubbling up.
Yes. Why does an unscooped pile of dog waste throw us into a physiological meltdown?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it comes down to the biological reality of stress. We can look at the research of Dr. Aditi Narurkar here. When you are calm, your prefrontal cortex is driving.
That's the logic and decision-making part of the brain, right?
Exactly. It's the highly evolved CEO of your mind. But when someone triggers you, like the coughing guy, your amygdala detects a threat.
And the amygdala is all about survival and self-preservation.
Right. And it has zero nuance. It can't tell the difference between a physical predator and a rude guy on an airplane invading your airspace. It just sounds a massive alarm and completely hijacks your brain.
So it literally shuts down the logic center.
It does. It suppresses the prefrontal cortex and floods your system with cortisol and adrenaline. You are thrust into biological survival mode over a minor annoyance.
Which totally explains why you sit there gripping the armrests, fantasizing about screaming at the coughing guy.
Yeah.
Your body thinks you need to fight.
Your body is prepped for combat.
This is where the let them theory acts as a mental on and off switch. It is so cool, saying, let them acts as a deliberate signal to the amygdala that this isn't a true threat. It turns off the alarm.
It's a cognitive override.
But just knowing it isn't a real threat doesn't instantly flush the adrenaline out. You need a physical intervention, which is the let me part.
Right, which involves a deep breath to stimulate the vagus nerve.
Yeah, and taking that deep belly breath physically slows your heart rate. It re-engages the prefrontal cortex. It's like hitting the clutch in a manual car. Let them disengages the spinning engine of your anxiety, and let me lets you smoothly shift into the right gear for your response.
That's a perfect analogy.
So with the coughing guy, Mel used this sequence. Her amygdala flared up. She hit the clutch and thought, let him cough. Then she shifted gears and thought, let me protect my own space.
She didn't pick a fight.
No, she just pulled her scarf up over her face, put on her noise-canceling headphones, and went back to reading her book. She completely controlled her own response.
She contained the situation within her own sphere of influence. If she had let the amygdala drive, she would have caused a scene and spiked her cortisol for the whole flight.
Exactly. But, okay, let's escalate the stakes a bit. Dealing with strangers on a plane is one thing. But what happens when the stress is coming from people who are judging our actual life choices?
That introduces a much heavier psychological burden because we are deeply wired to care about other people's opinions. We want to belong to the tribe.
We really do. We spend so much of our lives holding back, not taking risks, because we're terrified of being judged. But here's where it gets really interesting. The source material brings up this wild statistic. The average human has about 70,000 thoughts a day.
The sheer volume is just staggering.
It is. And most of them are totally random. You could barely control your own thoughts. So the idea that you can somehow micromanage and control the 70,000 thoughts firing inside someone else's head is a scientific impossibility.
It's an exhausting exercise in futility. Attempting mind control over your peers just leads to burnout.
So the theory gives you this revolutionary permission. You have to give people the freedom to think bad thoughts about you. Let them roll their eyes. Let them judge your career pivot. Let them misunderstand you.
Releasing that need to be universally understood is incredibly liberating. But we have to acknowledge why this is so hard, especially when the judgment comes from your family.
Oh, family judgment is the absolute hardest.
It is. And to navigate that, we need to look at Lisa Bilyeu's concept of the frame of reference.
Let's break that down because it explains so much about family conflict.
A frame of reference is the unique lens through which a person views reality. It is built from their lived experiences, their generation, their traumas, and everyone's lens is different.
Mel shares this really poignant story about this. 30 years ago, when she met her husband, Chris, her mother was deeply unsupportive. She was cold and distant.
Which Mel internalized as a direct judgment of her worth.
Yeah, she thought her mom just didn't respect her choices. But years later, she looked at it through her mother's frame of reference. Mel's mom had lived her whole life in the Midwest where family proximity was everything.
Right, and Chris was from the East Coast.
Exactly. So when her mom looked at Chris, she didn't see a bad guy. She saw an East Coast trajectory. She saw her daughter moving thousands of miles away. Her negative opinion wasn't about hating Chris.
It was about grief. From the mother's frame of reference, her disapproval made perfect sense as a defense mechanism against losing her child.
That is such a huge realization, but it also brings up a pushback I have. So what does this all mean? Do I just let my family be bigots or insult my life choices to my face just because I understand their frame of reference?
This raises an important question, and we have to be very clear here. Empathy is not agreement. Understanding someone's frame of reference does not mean you tolerate abuse.
Okay, good. Empathy explains the behavior, but it doesn't excuse it.
Exactly. It simply removes the power struggle. It allows you to stop taking their judgment as a reflection of your reality. You say, let them have their worldview. I can't rewire their decades of conditioning.
And then you use the let me step to set the boundary.
Right. You say, let me communicate what topics are off limits. Let me walk out of the room if that boundary is breached. You make decisions that make you proud and protect your peace.
You stop arguing with their reality and you ruthlessly protect your own. I love that. And speaking of evaluating relationships, we need to talk about the really specific heartbreak of adult friendships fading away.
The great scattering.
Yes. When we were kids, our friendships were built on the forced structure of the same schools and the same schedules.
The infrastructure was provided for us.
But then we grow up, and the great scattering happens. People move, they get married, they change jobs, and adult friendships change dramatically.
To understand this, we have to look at the three invisible pillars of friendship from the text: proximity, timing, and energy.
Let's walk through those.
Proximity is geographical convenience. Timing relates to your current season of life, like if you are working 80 hours a week and your friend just had twins, your rhythms don't match.
And energy is just that intangible connection, right?
Yes. And if a friendship fades, it is almost always a natural shift in one of these three pillars, not a personal attack.
But it feels personal when you're left out.
Yeah.
Mel has a story about this. She was working in New York a lot, and back home, she had a group of 6 mom friends. While she was away, they kept bonding, planning dinners, doing school runs.
Because their lives continued while she was traveling.
Right. But Mel would come home, see them together at a soccer game, and feel totally ostracized. She felt like they voted her off the island. How do we not become bitter in those moments?
By realizing that expecting adult friendships to function like childhood ones is a trap. Let them means allowing friends to evolve, get busy, or drift without making them the villain. Her proximity and timing had just shifted.
So we have to give them grace to live their lives. But if we just let everyone drift, don't we end up totally alone?
We do, if we are passive, which is why the let me solution is so critical here.
You have to go first. You have to stop waiting for the text. You have to take the initiative. Let me organize the book club. Let me initiate the coffee date.
The proactivity required in adulthood is significant. But the beautiful thing is that the third pillar, the energy, rarely breaks.
Oh, that is so true. You can text an old friend you haven't seen in years, and within 5 minutes of getting a coffee, you are laughing at the same jokes. The connection is there. It just needs you to step up and reactivate the timing and proximity.
It just needs a spark. But this transitions us into the most difficult application of the theory. What if you genuinely need a partner or a loved one to change a really destructive or annoying behavior?
Right. What if they refuse to go to the doctor or they won't stop vaping? We know we can't force them, but can we really just say, let them? Do we have to nag them because we love them?
To answer that, we have to look at the science of resistance. Dr. Alok Kanojia's research shows that human beings are wired to move toward pleasure and away from pain.
And nagging them is registered as pain.
Exactly. Pressuring someone is emotionally painful, so they instinctively pull away. They become defensive. And on top of that, Dr. Tali Sharot's research proves that the brain literally tunes out negative information and threats.
I love the analogy for this. If you try to nag someone into going to the gym by quoting heart disease stats, their brain treats your voice like a pop-up ad on a website. It just instinctively clicks the X and closes the window.
They literally do not absorb the threat.
So lecturing is totally useless, which means we need a different approach. And the text provides a specific framework for influence called the ABCDE loop. Let's walk through this.
This loop is brilliant. It uses motivational interviewing to bypass their defensive shield.
So step A is apologize and ask open-ended questions. But before you even do that, you have to do the 5 whys on yourself to make sure you aren't just trying to control them for your own anxiety.
Right, you have to ensure your motives are clean. Then you apologize. Not for their behavior, but for your nagging. It disarms their amygdala.
And then you ask the open-ended questions like, I notice you seem really exhausted lately. How are your energy levels? You want to create internal tension for them, right?
Yes, you want the idea for change to come from them, which leads to step B, back off and observe behavior.
Which is so hard. You have to bite your tongue and give them space so the idea actually becomes theirs.
Autonomy is essential for real change.
And while you are backing off, you move to step C. Celebrate progress and model the change. If you want them to be healthier, you start walking and eating better yourself. You model it.
You use positive reinforcement, like the story of the wife who started walking on her own and just praised her husband's tiny efforts instead of lecturing him. Dopamine makes the new behavior sticky.
But what if 3 months pass and they do absolutely nothing? This is where we get to steps D and E. Decide if it's a deal breaker and end it.
You have to be brutally honest with yourself. If a quarter of a year passes with no change, you have to ask, Can I live with this exact behavior forever?
If the answer is yes, then you're complaining. You have to drop it and truly let them. But if the answer is no, if it is destroying your mental health,
Then you end the relationship. You cannot stay in a partnership banking on a fantasy that they will suddenly change.
it is a heavy level of accountability. But that brings us to the hardest part of this. The ABC loop works for everyday habits. But what if the person is truly spiraling, dealing with severe addiction or crippling anxiety or depression? Can we ethically say, let them when someone is drowning?
This raises an important question about the clinical difference between supporting someone and enabling them.
The text is really firm on this hard truth. The more you rescue someone, the more they sink.
Yes. Dr. Robert Waldinger and Dr. Luana Marquez explain that avoidance is a primary coping mechanism for anxiety and addiction. People run from the pain.
And when we try to cushion them from the consequences, like paying their debts or making excuses for them, we think we are helping.
But we are actually enabling. When you manage their environment so they never feel the friction, you rob them of the motivational tension required to heal.
Mel shared that story about her daughter's night terrors. For a decade, Mel would run in, soothe her, and manage everything so the daughter wouldn't feel the anxiety.
Which prevented the child from developing the internal tools to self-soothe.
The book uses a football analogy that makes this so clear. Support is standing on the sidelines and tossing them the ball. You can keep tossing it, you can provide resources and love, but they have to catch it.
They have to run the field.
Enabling is grabbing the ball out of their hands and trying to run it down the field for them because they refuse to move.
Which will eventually exhaust you and leaves them completely unequipped to play the game on their own.
So empowering healing means applying let them. By letting them face the pain of their reality, you let them feel the consequences.
And the let me part is maintaining a loving boundary. It is validating their feelings and holding a beacon of hope that they are capable of doing the hard work to heal themselves.
It is profound. We have covered so much ground today. We moved from turning off our internal stress alarms with the vagus nerve to deflecting the judgments of others using their frame of reference.
We talked about rebuilding adult friendships through the great scattering.
And finally, transforming our deepest relationships by replacing control with influence and true support. It really all comes down to dropping that broken steering wheel.
It really does.
I want to leave you with a final thought today. If you took all the thousands of hours and all the emotional wattage you spent trying to manage the thoughts, moods, and actions of everyone around you, and you pointed all of that energy back at yourself, what could you build with your one wild and precious life?
That is the ultimate question.
You don't need anyone else's permission to find out. Your Let Me era starts right now. Thank you so much for joining us on this Decode Deep Dive. We barely scratched the surface of the science and the stories available here.
There is so much more to explore.
Please make sure to subscribe to the show, leave a comment about which Let Them moment resonated most with you, and we highly recommend purchasing Mel Robbins' book, The Let Them Theory, to get the full experience and access to her bonus appendixes on parenting and team management. Until next time, take care of yourselves and let them be.